Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the Sports Buzz here on HBC TV 25. I'm Justin Barrientos. Thank you for joining us today, and we have a little bit different panel here today. Landon Evanson from HBC is here, and John Casper from the Winona Daily News making his Sports Buzz debut. Thank you for joining us.
I'm very excited.
All right, very good. Well, we'll start out by talking about one of the biggest football games that we've covered here on HBC, and that was the Red Wing Winona High football game on Friday. And John, I know that you at the Daily News, you were kind of hyping it as a huge game as well. It was a battle of the undefeateds. What did you come away from that game thinking?
Well, I was really surprised. I mean, you know, you kind of go into that game wondering, you know, are the Windhawks for real? Mm-hmm. You know, they won 3 games. They didn't have a big margin of victory in any of them, and they just came out right away on that opening drive and really just took it to Red Wing. And the final score was 44-20. I don't really think it was that close. You know, that game was over at halftime. And it could have been, you know, if they wanted to be, you know, 60-7, it could have been. I mean, that was just a really thorough, dominating performance.
And Landon, I know that, you know, you sent me a message halfway through the first half, just amazed at how many carries Tanner Remlinger had. He had 15 in a row to start the game.
Yeah, it's just an absolutely astounding number. And when you look at it, I mean, you always hear about pitchers at the high school level or even college level with their pitch counts, and are you overusing them and extending them and putting them in harm's way? But Remlinger just kept getting the ball and getting the ball and getting the ball, and obviously you're going to go up, is it okay if we keep giving it to you? Of course he's going to say yes. It was just kind of a surprise that John Casilius continued to go to the horse and keep giving it to Remlinger, but obviously he was very productive, and Winona's offensive line did a very good job. I know you had talked about from the game where Red Wing played Century that their line play was very impressive on both sides.
Yeah. And
the Windhawks offensive line, it just absolutely dominated. I think what I take away from more than anything coming in, people weren't really expecting a lot out of Winona and Red Wing, and you look at, you know, their schedule the rest of the way, the teams that Winona has to play are 4-8, other than Mankato West, who's 4-0. So it's likely they could have finished 7-1. Mm-hmm. And for Red Wing, same thing. They have to play Mankato West. The rest of the teams they play are 2-10 the rest of the way. So you're talking about teams that can easily finish 6-2, 7-1. So they're going to be in good position at the end of the year as well.
Were you surprised by how effective the run game was for Winona High?
Yeah, you know, and I think it was one of those things. The reason they gave the ball to Tanner so many times was it was working. I mean, if it's working, why do something else? I think they ran 5 or 6 plays that game. They ran the exact same pass play. So Winona has a lot in its bag of tricks going forward.
All right, let's take a look at also one of the other games that was going on in Winona, and that was Winona State's home opener against Minot State on Saturday. And Winona State came away with the win after losing at Minnesota State Moorhead the week before. Takeaways from that game?
You know, I think the offense is still kind of a mystery why it can't quite get on track. You know, that it's a little inconsistent at parts. You know, Josh Mikas is the best wide receiver maybe in all of Division II. And he's really having a hard time getting going. They still have protection issues with Jack Nelson. So, you know, from that side of the ball, it was iffy. I thought they played fantastic on defense. You know, that's the side of the ball I think they've really improved on in the last year plus. And I think going forward, that might be their calling card more. They might be more of a defensive team than they are on offense.
It's like you talked about. I mean, the first game, they weren't able to get any sacks. They weren't able to get any turnovers. And they certainly changed that in the second game against Minot State. So if the defense, and the NSIC is a tremendous conference. I mean, they're going to face offensive teams. They can put some points on the board. So the idea is just to be able to contain people. But like you talked about, you know, the offensive inconsistency, but Alan May is having a terrific year. You know, Mikas is more than likely going to come around. And like you said, I mean, he's certainly the best receiver in the conference, if not in Division II. And then, you know, they really haven't even gotten Paul Preston going yet. I mean, so this is a team that definitely, and Jack Nelson's fantastic. I mean, so there's a lot of talent there. So if they can get some offensive consistency and the defense continues to play, I mean, obviously they're not going to play as well every week as they did in this last game. But if they can do that, they're definitely going to be a contender, I think.
All right, let's get to our rant of the week. And I have the rant of the week this week, and it's about Adrian Peterson. Now, let me temper this by saying I've been accused many times of being a Vikings homer.
All the time.
And there was nothing good from that Viking game against San Francisco. But Adrian Peterson, I know there are a lot of people on Facebook and on social media that were saying that he should have gotten more carries, they should have gotten him more involved in the offense, but the fact is, it just wasn't there against San Francisco. The Vikings were without their starting center, they were without Phil Lodeholt, and for that reason, the line just wasn't there to, A, protect Teddy Bridgewater, but also to get any holes open for Adrian Peterson, and I think that's why he wasn't having the first half that we would have liked to have seen. Obviously, he's been away from the game since week 1 of last year, but it just wasn't working, and I think that I'm okay with not throwing Adrian Peterson to the Wolves in that first game of the season because we don't want him to get hurt and not have him for the rest of the season. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, he hasn't played a game in a year, and he didn't play, at all in the preseason, didn't do much in practice, so it's going to take some time. That being said, it is a little bit alarming that he wasn't effective at all. And Jerick McKinnon, he kind of made a few things happen, so you maybe wonder why was he effective and AP wasn't. If we're sitting here week 6, week 7, and we're still seeing these problems with AP, then you start wondering, hey, what is going on? But first game facing an amped up 49ers team, I wouldn't get too worked up over that.
I think that's what happens in the NFL today, and I think it's carried over in other sports, and it's really nauseating to listen about it with baseball. And people are talking about, is this the team to beat? It's mid-May. People are just overreact to everything they see at the moment. We've seen many teams start very slowly and then finish very strong. Adrian Peterson has a track record. I'm sure he's going to be fine. And like you said, but until you get to that, 1/3 of the way through or halfway through the season before you start hitting the panic button. And it could even be where he struggles for a while and all of a sudden he just turns it on, and then it gives him an element that they weren't really looking that they could rely upon. But I thought it was funny last night that Trent Dilfer, after the first series, really he didn't do anything, and they said, well, he didn't touch the ball in the first drive, and Dilfer said, well, he'll be rested. You think? He hasn't played a game in over a year, Trent. It's one of those things that he and Chris Berman are just intolerable. I'll get to that later.
Right.
But I just think overall it was just a bad performance, and I think a lot of people aren't expecting much out of San Francisco, but they still have some talented players there. I mean, you talk about Navarro Bowman on the defensive side of the ball, and offensively, I look at San Francisco, they have a lot of talent. I didn't think Carlos Hyde would play as well as he did,
right.
And he's another one that people are like, oh, is he going to go for like 1,800 yards? It was one game.
Right.
He played very well, and he's obviously a talented running back, but when you look at Bolden and having Torrey on the outside, and when you throw in the fact that Kaepernick still is a talented quarterback, this isn't a team that's exactly completely bereft of talent. I think people were thinking they were going to go into San Francisco and play a team that would be lucky to win 2 games this year. I don't think it's necessarily the case. So it was a bad performance, but you chalk it up, and you go into next week and see what happens.
All right, and as I was saying to you earlier, the Vikings faced a kind of new Colin Kaepernick where he wasn't run first, he was throw first,
right.
And I think that kind of helped San Francisco to have the day they did against the Viking offense. Well, we're going to talk plenty more about the NFL coming up in just a moment here on the Sports Buzz, but first we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about other Week 1 NFL news that's coming up right after this.
HBC Sports has your volleyball fix this season as your exclusive home for St. Mary's volleyball throughout the fall. The 2015 Cardinals will look to build on an impressive 20-13 mark a year ago, and you'll get to watch it happen with 5 matches brought to you live on TV 25. For the full broadcast schedule, simply visit hbci.com/sports for details to find out when the Redbirds will take the court. That's St. Mary's volleyball all season long, only on HBC Sports.
Tune in for the Sports Buzz every Tuesday at 5:30 as a panel of local sports journalists tackle the hottest topics on everything from local high school and collegiate sports to regional discussion about the Twins, Brewers, Vikings, and Packers. With the Power Play Fantasy Football Challenge to the Rant of the Week and NFL Pick'em, the Sports Buzz is fast-paced and sure to entertain. That's new episodes of the Sports Buzz every Tuesday at 5:30 with replays only on HBC TV 25.
This is HBC Job Finder. Masterson Staffing has immediate openings in Winona, Stockton, and Wabasha for first, second, and third shifts. Positions as sewing and mending techs, machine relief operators, and general production labor available. Pay up to $12.50 an hour. Paid weekly with benefits. Call 507-252-8481 for detail. Email your resume to rochester@mastersonstaffing.com. For a full description, go to jobs.hbci.com.
If you're looking for Winona State on the gridiron this fall, HBC has you covered. Every moment for all 5 WSU home games can be seen on TV 25, presented by El Patron Mexican Grill and Cantina. To find out who the Warriors will be facing off with at Maxwell Field at Warriors Stadium throughout the season, simply visit hbci.com/sports for game dates and kickoff times. All the touchdowns, big hits, and exciting moments of Winona State football can be found on HBC Sports, presented by El Patron Mexican Grill and Cantina. And welcome back to the Sports Buzz. Let's continue our talk about the NFL and Week 1. And John, did you have any surprises in Week 1 this year?
I think Buffalo, the way that they played so well against a team that was in the AFC title game a year ago, and Tyrod Taylor. Who would have called that? You know, at
Ty would have.
the start of the year. You know, that was pretty impressive, and I think, you know, I am a Packers fan, and so this is not like digging on the Vikings, but I think just how poorly they played. You know, just after all this, you know, hype all offseason about how they're going to be, you know, this great offensive team. So I think on the good end, Buffalo, bad end, the Vikes.
I was surprised by a few things. I was very surprised that Seattle lost at St. Louis. I know the Rams have a good defense and some good young players, but I just, you know, you have a Super Bowl caliber team, a team that should be 12-4, 13-3. I was very surprised they opened up. It seems as if the Seahawks, particularly on the road, play down to the level of the teams that they're playing against. I think it's becoming a bit of a problem for the Seahawks. You can't keep going on the road. If you're going to win a Super Bowl or have a top seed, you need to be able to win those games. St. Louis is definitely a team that they should be beating. I still don't know how Dallas defeated the Giants. And I say that not just because I can't figure it out, but because after they got the first down, I just turned off the television, and that was it. To wake up the next day and found out that Dallas had won the game. I still can't figure that out. But I mean, there were a few surprises on that. I think the biggest one for me though was the fact that Seattle lost. I didn't think that they would blow the Rams out, but I did not think that they would lose that game. So I was very surprised by that.
All right, let's move on and talk a little Minnesota Twins baseball. And John, you're a newcomer to the show, so the battle that I've been having the last few weeks is about the Twins and the wild card race. Do you think the Twins will be able to get that last wild card spot?
You know, I mean, when it comes to the wild card, there's so many things that are in play this last week of the season. It could involve, you know, as we were talking off camera, Houston sliding back to the pack a little bit. In that AL West, it could involve something that we don't even see, you know, down the road. I think that the addition of, especially that second wild card, there are so many intangibles that come into play. Could be matchups the last week of the season. People like Matt Harvey, who all of a sudden run into an innings limit. You know, is that going to be an issue that maybe is not publicized? So, you know, I think just the fact that the Twins are in a postseason race of any kind right now is a win for them.
Absolutely.
Whether or not they make it to the postseason, that's gravy. You know, I think this has been a big year for them, regardless of what happens.
It's got to be a great thing that they're beating Chris Sale, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to touch on that. I'm just saying, but it is true. I mean, the future is very bright for the Twins, and the fact that they're still in it and they have a chance and maybe even do slide into the playoffs, even if it's a wild card and they lose in the wild card game. I mean, that's a huge bonus because you weren't expecting that this early. Yeah, I mean, the fact that, you know, they beat up on Chris Sale the last two times he's taken the hill. I mean, Chris Sale is, you know, if he's not the best pitcher in the American League, he's definitely the best left-handed pitcher in the American League, and he's a division rival, and the Twins have just taken it to him. I think the thing that the Twins have going for them right now is all the young players who haven't been there before, and now they see it, they know it's a reality. And Molitor has been there before. He went to a World Series with the Brewers, won a World Series with the Blue Jays. And I think the fact this is where Torrey Hunter's worth really is going to come through. Now, he's been productive. The batting average is down, but Torrey's had a good year. He's been productive. And you look at somebody who's been in the playoffs this many times. He's going to be able to be in the ears of the young players. And so, you know, there's no guarantee he'll be back, which he has to be giggling about because he's been in the playoffs so many times. But I think it's true of any sport. Once you see a team get to a point where they're on the cusp, you know, they take it to another level. I think for the Twins, it just really comes down to, will the pitching hold up? Because when they pitch well, they can play with anybody, and they've shown that. It's just whether or not the pitching shows up. So if Gibson continues to pitch well as he has, you know, Phil Hughes pitches the way he's capable. I know we've talked about Jepson on here, you know, but you just look, if the pitching is there, they have a shot. But if they go a week, 10 days where the pitching just kind of implodes, they're going to fall out of it.
All right, time now for our dumpster fire of the week, and Landon has our dumpster fire.
I don't have anything necessarily scripted for this. It's just kind of off the cuff, which is pretty much everything Chris Berman does. Yeah. You know, when he went to ESPN, he came out of Brown University as a history major, right? ESPN was a startup station in 1979. He liked sports, so he went for it. And he's still there, and he's a big reason why they are where they are today. There's no question about it, but it's almost, I'm going to use the word appalling with ESPN for the worldwide leader in sports, the number of broadcasters they have that are absolutely garbage. Like Chris Berman, I even said it on Twitter last night, he is the Garrison Keillor of broadcasters. Oh, wow. And it is time for him to ride on to Lake Wobegon and just be done with it. The hokiness, I mean, with the home run derby, the back thing, that was cool in '86, you know, but he just keeps on with it. And the nicknames and the goofiness and the little nicknames for the new San Francisco Stadium, it's impossible to listen to him, and he's not a good play-by-play guy. You know, he's just not. I mean, you're not going to sit there. I mean, I would rather listen to Joe Buck all day, every day, than listen to Chris Berman. It was just embarrassing, and it doesn't help that Trent Dilfer is just a dolt. You know, you walk around, you talk about the number of quarterbacks with a Super Bowl ring. I'm going to tell you something, bro. That Ravens defense is why you got that jewelry, okay? So don't sit there and talk. It was just, it was intolerable listening to them. And then on top of it, the game itself.
Yeah.
So it was like when you paired the two together, you know, it's like, are my ears bleeding? Will you check? Because I think my ears are bleeding. I just can't take it anymore. Berman, it's just time for him to just walk on. And I think I read an article almost 10 years ago, probably about that long. He said that he's getting to the point where he's ready to step aside because he doesn't like where ESPN is now because all the focus is on basketball and all these other things. And well, okay, well, then do so.
Your thoughts of the play-by-play of Chris Berman?
I mean, you know, it's almost so bad it's worth watching in itself. And you know, I'm a new guy here, so I don't know the whole, you know, volume capabilities of these microphones. Otherwise, I'd do a Trent Dilfer impersonation right now. But
go ahead and do it.
I turned down the volume, and he got louder. I mean, it was unbelievable how loud he was. Like, I think there's laws against that.
There should be
to be that loud that late at night.
Did he refer to Chris Berman as Chris once?
No, it's
think
Boom.
so.
You know what, Boom?
Yeah, Boom.
Oh, we get it,
Boom.
Boomer. I got it.
A nickname on a nickname. I had to explain to my wife why Chris Berman was called Boomer in the first place, which she thought was dumb, and then Boom was even worse.
Yeah, so. It's just I can't. And I love the home run derby. I mean, now we're doing Berman in general.
Right.
We've gone off the football. I love the home run derby, but the fact that he gets to do it and we have to listen to that. He's, you know, he pulls out the map. He's in the hotel room, whatever city they're in. What are towns that are close? Oh, this one's on its way to Bemidji. Shut up. Shut up. The first couple times that happened, it was like, you know, you hadn't heard it before, so it was like, but now it's played. And for someone with a Brown education, you're kind of a moron because he just doesn't understand that.
Well, they have to cover so many games on that opening Monday night that they had to have somebody on the air. And
it's
ESPN. I know.
Don't act like you went from Tirico to, well, I guess we got to go with Boom.
Except, you know what? We were all watching it. So,
that's true.
So I guess maybe the joke's on us.
And I don't we were watching because it was the Vikings. I mean, if it was like...
And I don't like Tirico, but Tirico, I mean, compared to, you know, Berman, is just fantastic. You know, really. And I actually didn't mind him last night, but then he's got the dolt of all dolts sitting next to him in the booth. John Gruden. I'm done.
All right. I think we're done for this segment. Let's take a break on the Sports Buzz. When we come back, we'll have our fantasy wrap-up from last week and also this week's picks for the NFL that's coming up here on the Sports Buzz.
Join HBC Sports' Extra Point one-camera coverage of high school football and soccer throughout the fall, presented by Lewiston Auto. In addition to our Football Night Crew broadcasts, Extra Point will bring you 8 games from the gridiron and 9 games from the pitch. For the full slate of games, simply visit hbci.com/sports to find out when your team will be on the field. That's Extra Point coverage of HBC Sports presented by Lewiston Auto, all fall, only on TV 25.
Get an inside look at the Winona State football program with the Tom Sawyer Show on TV 25. Brought to you by Jefferson Pub and Grill. Host Justin Barrientos sits down with the Warriors head coach each week to break down last week's game and to look ahead at WSU's next opponent, as well as chat with Winona State players. Tune in at 4:30 p.m. on Thursdays, 6 p.m. on Fridays, 7 a.m. on Saturdays, and before every Warrior home game for the Tom Sawyer Show on HBC. Brought to you by Jefferson Pub and Grill.
Want the latest news on St. Mary's University athletics? Watch the Cardinals Nest on HBC TV 25. Dean Beckman and SMU Sports Information Director Donnie Netto will talk about the past week in Cardinal athletics, highlighting the best in each Cardinal sports team. Player and coach guests will add their stories and insight each week with new shows Thursdays at 5 p.m. and replays Fridays at 6:30 p.m. and Saturdays at 7:30 a.m. on HBC TV 25.
HBC Sports is your exclusive home for Winona State soccer and volleyball for the 2015 season. Whether you prefer spikes and sets on the court or goals and saves on the pitch, if it's happening with Warriors volleyball or soccer, HBC has you covered. For the full broadcast schedule, simply visit hbci.com/sports to find out when each match will be featured live. That's Winona State soccer and volleyball all season long, only on TV 25.
And welcome back to the Sports Buzz here on TV 25. Time now to recap our power play. Patrick Merrick from the Winona Post will join us for picks in just a moment. But first, we have to give Jeff Tice his due. He came on strong in the end of the baseball And now he wins week 1 of the power play for football.
I very much enjoy. Tice told me to draft Gronkowski #1. I drafted the rest of the team. So Tice doesn't get any credit for this.
Okay.
Where is Tice, by the way? He's in absentia, as they call it.
He is. I mean, you had talked about a personality camp.
Where they have spas.
They may or may not have spas.
He might be getting exfoliated as we speak.
I'm sure wherever Tice is, he's being exfoliated. And I can't wait because he's going to watch this on the treadmill. I'm going to catch hell at about 5:50 sometime on Wednesday afternoon. So,
all right. So what were Jeff's choices for trades? Or
yes, he was going to keep the. Well, I am going to keep the team intact, and I had Paul draw out of the hat because Paul wasn't here today. I had our producer Derek go ahead and do that, and he pulled the best name in the hat, which was Keenan Allen, because he had Des Bryant. He's hurt. Instead of Julio Jones, I wanted him to have a receiver that wasn't quite as good. So he gets Keenan Allen. Now, granted, Keenan Allen might not put up the numbers he did from week 1 every week, but Keenan Allen's a really good receiver, so he ended up not getting the short end of the stick on that one.
Yeah, as you can see from the numbers that I finished last in the power play this week, and it's the first time that I've played fantasy football. I'm okay with that because in our office pool, I beat Landon.
Yeah,
so
did.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah,
I'll go with that. All right, let's get into our pick'em, our NFL pick'em, and Paul and Jeff and Ty were all 3-2. Patrick, you and I were 2-3.
It was a rough week.
Well,
then there was a Viking game
happened,
after
right?
that too.
Yeah, that's part of it, I think. All right. Well, we can improve this week. Let's start out by talking about Denver versus Kansas City. That's the first one. That's going to be on Thursday. And I think what was our mantra last year? Never pick against Peyton Manning.
Don't pick against Peyton Manning.
I'm going to pick against Peyton Manning. I'm actually going with Kansas City on this one. It's a Dave Dickey special. He's a Kansas City Chiefs fan, so I'm going to go with Kansas City on this one.
You know, it started to happen at the end of last year, especially in the playoffs. They all blamed it on the cold. I'm blaming it on the old. He has turned into squeaky voiced Peyton Manning. Instead of the Omaha, Alex Smith steady. He's got some good weapons. I'm going with Kansas City.
Yeah, you know, I wasn't that impressed with the Broncos in that first game. I also like on Thursday night. I always like to pick with the home team. KC is really tough at home. They had a pretty good performance week 1. I'm going to go with the Chiefs.
Yeah, I got to go with Kansas City. I mean, I like the Chiefs, particularly the fact that it's at home, but the Broncos, they're just having issues, whether it's protection, getting the ball. I mean, they have Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. They're having a hard time getting them the football. I mean, you look at Peyton Manning, the fact that I think he finished with less than 10 points.
Yeah,
you never see that from Peyton Manning. He usually has, 17 points by halftime. So something's going on there with them where they need to get it figured out, and I don't think they're going to be able to do it quick enough to beat Kansas City.
Okay. Detroit at Minnesota is the next game, and I actually like what Coach Zimmer said after the game. He said, in my almost 2 years here, this was not the team that I recognized playing against San Francisco, so I think things are going to change this week. And it is against Detroit, who I think is the beatable team in the NFC North, along with Chicago. So I'm going to go with Minnesota at home on this one. They burned me against San Francisco, but I'm going to pick the Vikings anyway.
Well, speaking of burning, I'm the one that called San Francisco a dumpster fire. Right. I learned a valuable lesson, though. If you were hanging around dumpster fires, sometimes you get burned. And the Vikings were not ready for that play. They were not ready. I'm going Vikings home cooking, but they better turn it around fast.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes everybody makes when they look at the NFL is overreacting to what happened in week 1. And I think there are going to be a lot of people that overreact to the Vikings loss. I don't think they were nearly as bad as that showing that they had, even though we talked about AP and whether or not, he's 100% ready. But, I really like the Vikings in this one. I think Stafford is a little hurt. I think the Lions are a little shaken after blowing an 18-point lead. Gambling is not legal in this country, but if it were, I would back the truck up and put it all on the Vikings.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, I have to take the Vikings. I think they're going to bounce back. Paul also has the Vikings. And for Mr. Tice, he says, does Justin still think the Vikings can win 11 to 12 games? That was a fun argument. What was the question? Oh, yeah, last week Minnesota couldn't block, run, or get a Hail Mary to the end zone from the 50. What does this mean? I like the Vikings this week.
What was our other mantra from last year? It's that the Vikings don't play well in nationally televised games, so we'll factor that in.
And West Coast games that are against the 49ers. I go all the way back to John Brody.
There you go. All right, this one is an interesting one. New England against Buffalo, and it's going to be in Buffalo. And John Casper said earlier in the show that Buffalo is maybe his surprise pick from last week of week 1. you know what? I'm actually going to go with the Bills in this one over Tom Brady and the Patriots.
Yeah, break up the Bills. What a defense. Oh, my goodness. But then they do have this guy by the name of Tom Brady and then Gronky, my fantasy favorite, who won my game for me. I got to go Patriots.
Yeah, don't overreact to week 1. go with Tom Brady and the Pats.
My mind tells me that New England wins this game because of the reasons you just said. I mean, the fact that Tom Brady going on the road, he's not going to be rattled. But I'm just going to stick with Buffalo because I like the Bills, and I would like to see a little bit of a changing of the guard there, at least for them to get off to a good start. Paul wants New England. Mr. Tice, well, exfoliating at the moment. Classic Belichick in this game. Buffalo's offense won't look nearly as good as it did against the overrated Colts. Pats win 17-3.
All right, San Diego at Cincinnati, and this is kind of interesting. Both teams 1-0 coming into this game, and San Diego had to rally to beat Detroit, but I'm going to go with San Diego on this one.
Well, Andy Dalton had a great game, but it was regular season, so he has to put those up. Phillip Rivers has got a lot of weapons. You know, Stevie Johnson rejuvenated, Keenan Allen back to his rookie form. I've got to go with the Chargers.
I have absolutely no idea who to pick in this one. I thought Cincinnati was going to lose week 1 to Oakland, so I mean that shows what I know. So let's go with the Bengals again.
I'm going to go with Cincinnati for the same reason that Ty says. The only reason I'm picking the Bengals is because it's at home, and Mr. Van Beek also picked the Bengals.
All right, Seattle at Green Bay. Oh boy, it's not quite the frozen tundra yet in Green Bay, so I think Seattle has a chance in this one. And
who knew?
This is for Ty. Seattle.
How about a 0-0 tie? And half of each team gets injured. What do you say? I really don't like either of these teams very much. But I am going to go with, I'm going to hold my nose and go with Green Bay.
Ooh.
I think Seattle's due for a step back this year. You know, I think they've had a lot of things break their way for the last couple of years. I think we saw that in week 1 in that loss. You know, maybe Marshawn Lynch has lost a step. That defense maybe has lost a step. I like the Packers at home, and I like it by a couple of touchdowns.
Paul wants Seattle. Ty says, I'm sure you all pick Green Bay, so give me Seattle. I know the Packers are really tough at home, but like I said, I still think Seattle is the best team in the National Football League, and I just don't see them allowing themselves to go 0-2. The Packers' defense is not good. I mean, they had the back and forth with the Bears. Of course, the Bears always play them tough, particularly in Chicago, but I don't think Seattle is going to allow themselves to be 0-2, so I'm taking the Seahawks.
All right. Patrick, your winner this week?
Okay, first of all, my poor son, who lives in Seattle, I gave him the duty of writing the column because, you know, otherwise he's trying to write it like 2 in the morning, and he's 2 hours earlier. So I think there was he gets a little bitter in it, so you might want to check it out. This week, Daryl Anderson, local legend, won the $115, and you could be the winner next week. Just pick up the Post, read the articles, look at all the ads, and then pick out who you think is going to be the winners in next week's scheduled NFL games. You can win $115 of my money.
All right. Thank you all for joining us here on the Sports Buzz. Thank you for joining us at home. We'll see you next week here on TV25.